You know, we tackled many topics together on how the coronavirus changed the lives of students, teachers, parents, and school leaders as well. You know, they've all been impacted in tremendous ways, both educationally and emotionally. They were forced to pivot to virtual learning without warning. But now, as we look forward to next year, so many questions remain, especially when it comes to what the next school year will hold for East Texans. It's our first special report in a series, Lessons Learned. Spring break 2020 turned into the longest of our lives.
All schools in the state of Texas shall be temporarily closed.
No curious minds walking these halls, no teachers at the head of the class, filling those young minds with STEM, language arts, fine arts, or history.
And then if you have a question, just raise your hand.
Instead, all becoming a part of history.
You know, I've heard some people in the school business say, oh, this changes the school system forever, and, this e-learning is going to be more and more common. And, I don't really agree with it. The culture that is created in the classroom is essential to a kid's success.
Yet from March to May, school campuses sat virtually empty. Virtually learning, a journey we'd all go on together in 2020. The question is, will that continue in the fall?
It's been a very strange time and era that we're in right now, but I think it's going to get better.
I don't know what the governor is going to decide. I don't know what the CDC is going to recommend that local schools decide to take on. I don't know how the public is going to feel, in 2 months about sending their kids back to school.
Legitimate questions without a lot of clear-cut answers at this point. But that certainly does not mean school leaders aren't preparing, not just to get students back in the classroom, but for the unknown. Tyler ISD Superintendent Dr. Marty Crawford, Superintendent Steve Clugston at Pine Tree ISD, and Head of School for Promise Academy all participated in our education town hall and then took time again to help us better understand what they're doing to best prepare students next year.
I think you've got plans A through M, but you can't get very deep on any of those plans.
Dr. Marty Crawford says because the exact rules of engagement haven't been presented to them yet, there are no definites right now for their roughly 18,000 students. But so far, the plan is to start school as scheduled in late August.
You may wind up, Dana, seeing a blending of traditional school. You may also see some type of hybrid to where you have traditional school, but you may have some that either because of medical reasons or conscientious decisions may actually stay at home, and you may have to provide some type of blended learning, distance learning to them as well.
You've likely heard the talk from the Texas Education Agency about intersessional calendars, starting school a month earlier with longer breaks and ending school later.
Even if you were to go to intersessional calendars, start earlier and then have these scheduled breaks in there, moving those breaks around are going to wind up being something we're all going to have to do anyways. If we do get another spite of this, we're really hoping that the decisions are going to be back down to the local level so that we can plan appropriately for this region, this part of the state.
Then there's social distancing to consider. The CDC recommending desks be 6 feet apart, lunch in classrooms, staggered start times, cloth masks for staff, and then daily temperature screenings for everyone, just to list a few.
You've got about 4 different plans in place depending on the social distancing requirements.
Pine Tree Superintendent Steve Clugston is responsible for 4,600 students and about 700 employees. He's taking so much into consideration, from transportation to class size and how much hand sanitizer he would need to keep students safe and healthy. But it's the what ifs.
But then on top of that, we've got to have some other things in place. When we get back to school, it's very likely that if you get an uptick in this region or an outbreak in this region, that it may shut you down for 2 or 3 weeks. I could see the state come in and say, okay, we're going to close schools in the Northeast Texas region because of an uptick in the COVID-19. Well, then we'd go back to an e-learning situation. And then you may come back at, say, 25% capacity, which means maybe a kid's coming 1 day a week and e-learning the other 4. And then you may work up to 50% where you've got kids coming twice a week and e-learning the other days. And then you could go right back to being everybody here, but with your enhanced social distancing procedures. So you could run through all 4 of those scenarios in a given year.
Luckily, they've got the summer to work out some of those details.
That's what the summer looks like for me, is trying to figure out, how we can work within the new normal with a usual school calendar.
But it's not just the larger public schools grappling with how best to reach their students next year, to reconnect and evaluate where they're at after such a long break from being in the classroom.
So plan A is to have the same calendar that we had decided on in January, but to really work toward greater fluency in technology, especially for our older grades, so that if we do have to switch to something like we experienced these last 3 months, that learning curve will be much less. But we also have a plan B and a plan C. In all of those things, of course, we're going to be paying attention to the health of the students and just taking it a day at a time, really.
Sarah Cumming, the head of school at the Promise Academy in Tyler, is looking at the possibility of cohorts, a new buzzword in education right now.
So if we are asked to physically distance more than in the classroom sizes that we have, then what we'll do is just split each class into 2 cohorts, and those cohorts will be with each other all day. Both sets of children will experience direct teacher instruction, while the other cohort might be working on the work that was just given to them by the teacher previously. So we'll just swap things out. That will make for a longer school day. That's kind of our plan B, is that if we have to physically distance further, what that means is teachers are going to have to teach everything twice, and we will need to have a longer school day. So we'll probably run a longer school day 4 days and then run a lab on a 5th day. Parents can opt in for students that need the additional help and tutoring.
So many scenarios for the fall, but one thing they know for sure.
We're all learning in this and figuring out how to do it better and meet the needs of our kids.
Then I think we can all forgive ourselves for how we've responded in 3 months. But if this ever happens to us again, we've got to be better. There's no doubt about that. And I think that's why you look at the learning management system upgrade along with the one-to-one devices to the 18,000 students in Tyler ISD as a way to come out of the back end of this better than we were when we went into it.
Because at the end of the day, or in this case, a pandemic, it's about our precious children looking to us every day to help them grow into well-rounded, resilient, successful adults. We've got you covered, East Texas. Dana Hughey, CBS 19. You know, it depends on who you talk to. For some, remote learning this fall has been a good experience, actually better than expected and better executed than in the spring. For others, they feel like schools should be further along in the process to seamlessly integrate virtual learners.
He felt like he was being ignored. He would say things like, "I'm not going to bother raising my hand. They're not even going to call on me." He didn't feel like part of the classroom.
It's better. It's more structured.
So I think they're doing really well. She has 7 different Microsoft Teams, 1 for each class.
Logging on to learn. It's become the new norm for many East Texas students, like Avery Hassel.
Avery, how do you think it's going?
It's going really good. I really liked it.
Class has been back in session for almost a month at many East Texas schools.
I just didn't feel like it was safe for her to go to school. Not safe enough, for sure. Avery had a bout of pneumonia when she was 13, and she was in the ICU for 4 days, and so her lungs are weaker because of it, and it just wasn't worth the risk with the COVID-19.
This would have been Avery's first year on campus at Jacksonville High School.
I cried, I'm not gonna lie. In my memories on Facebook, the first day of school always pops up, and the first day of pre-K happened to be the same as this year first day of school. And I was like, well, I never imagined this is what our first day of high school would look like, but it is what it is. So we took our first day of school picture with a laptop and a mask on.
I also talked with parents in White House and Nacogdoches about how they're feeling about distance learning this time around, now that schools have had the summer to prepare.
What we're seeing now is a stark contrast to what we had back then. In my opinion, I think a lack of planning on the side of the administration. I don't blame the teachers. They're doing the best they can.
It isn't what Jack Chandler and his son expected, who attends a charter school in Nacogdoches.
We initially chose synchronous. It was basically he sits in front of the computer and the video of a class is streamed live for him to observe. After, I don't even think it was 2 weeks, we decided to go asynchronous because, again, no schedule, very, very poor audio and video quality. We could hardly understand most of what was going on.
Chandler wanted to make sure his son had some sense of normalcy, so he set up a classroom inside their home.
We've got 5 shelves of books, another shelf full of projects and print-offs, colors and crayons, a scissor station. I have a separate desk, kind of like a teacher's desk. I don't at all think I'm a teacher, but I do have a desk I set up with a PC so I can sit over there and try to not interfere while he sits and does his lessons. But he's got a pencil sharpener in here. We say the Pledge of Allegiance to the American flag and the Texas flag every morning. And so I wanted to replicate that learning environment as closely as I could. And hopefully that's going to be something he'll benefit from.
What we're hearing from local districts, roughly 1/4 to 1/3 of parents around East Texas chose to give learning online another shot for their children. Adriana Pitts is one of those moms.
Last year, the teachers you can't blame them. They had, not that much amount of time to put things together. This time around, it's more dedicated to, the TEKS, the state lessons that they need to know.
Her 4 children attend school in White House.
They have Google Meets, so everything's through Google this year. And so they have specific times on when the teacher, wants the class or the virtual learners to log in and, talk about a lesson. Other teachers will record themselves and then upload it to the Google website, the Google Classroom, and then but the student has to participate and they have to make sure that they let the teacher know that they watched the video in order to get a participation grade.
Pitts also feels like the teachers are available to her and the children.
We have, email and text messages that I can contact with them. And they're actually pretty fast about communication with the kids. And so there's a way for the kids to even, message the teacher like in a chat in Google. And they seem to, go back and forth, even if it's just casual conversation. So the teachers are, real interactive when it comes to the kids. So this way it's more personal.
But it's still a big commitment from parents who chose virtual learning, especially when you have elementary school kids.
It takes a lot of me to make sure that they are, on task. I'm just grateful that I don't have a full-time job on top of this, because I've heard other parents do, and I get to spend time at home to help them follow along with their courses and make sure they're doing the right thing and keeping them on task. But it does take a lot, because they're I have 4 of them, so they're in different grades
and they have different opinions on learning from home.
They're divided. 2 of them don't like it because they miss, the social interaction with their friends. Another reason why the 2 don't like it is because, they have trouble, on the computer focusing. And so it makes it harder. They get frustrated and, staring at a screen for so long. The other 2 like it, based on the fact that it's easier, it's more one-on-one. They enjoy being on, the tablets or computers.
We've heard a lot over the last few months about connectivity issues due to poor broadband infrastructure across the state.
And then I went and bought a MiFi jetpack so that she could have stronger internet at home to do her assignments. We live about 12 miles outside of Jacksonville, and so Wi-Fi is not really an option here unless we want satellite, and even then it's spotty. So just using our phones and using our mobile hotspots is better.
Even with the internet issues, the Hassels hope this isn't the end of remote learning, but the future.
Oh, it's a great experience. We love it. And if it's an option next year, we'll do it next year.
Through all of this, what has been your biggest lessons learned for you and your family and for your son?
Don't rely on someone else to focus on your kid's education. As a parent, it's your number one responsibility to keep your kids safe. And after that, making sure they're a well-rounded person is one of the biggest jobs of parents, one of the biggest responsibilities that a parent has. And so focusing on his education, making sure that he's got the tools he needs to be successful in the future is my highest priority.
The coronavirus forced us all, parents and educators, to learn some tough lessons when it comes to the most effective way to reach each and every student. We've got you covered, East Texas. Dana Hughey, CBS 19. There's no question coronavirus is still a threat, but school leaders say they are worried about another threat as well. I talked with the biggest school district in East Texas and one of our smaller districts. They tell me they're worried about their remote learners not being successful.
The percentage of kids failing at least one or more classes at the end of the first grading period is sometimes as high as 90% or more in a grade level.
You have to understand that there is a contract that goes from the school back to the home for this virtual learning experience, and we're getting varying degrees of results back from us from there. 60% of your students are not being successful. You have to adjust.
Whether it's a district with 18,000 students like at Tyler ISD or just 850 students at Alba Golden, the struggle and success with remote learning seems fairly universal for the 10 to 20% of students still choosing that option. The question is, why? We asked Dr. Marty Crawford at TISD.
Well, I think there's a lot of factors. Certainly connectivity is sporadic, even through a metropolitan area like Tyler. You have pockets that are causing some barriers, even though we added some park and learn sites. And then I also think that to no fault of theirs, the support at home varies in tremendous ways, whether it be capacity, whether it be accessibility, connectivity. It could be that parents, are working, 2 jobs. And so in saying that, I think that that's one of the reasons that you have to adjust.
Superintendent Cole McClendon with Alba Golden ISD says the data indicated remote learners were regressing academically.
Because since kids were out last spring as well, we're looking at nearly a year of learning lag they'll have not being in class. So academically, we feel they need to be here in person because we're really struggling with reaching those kids. And for academic purposes, we feel like the best place is in the classroom with the teacher. And so we're wanting them to come back, but we're going to do it in a safe and healthy manner as well.
Another real concern the superintendents uncovered, the toll asynchronous remote learning is taking on teachers, who they say are working overtime to meet students' needs.
It really has doubled the workload for a teacher because they're not only teaching their classes in person, but they're trying to reach out and do as much as they can for those kids that are remote. So for a teacher, it can be a lot of work. I want to brag on ours here because they've not complained that they're here for kids. But it's frustrating when a kid's not logging on and not completing their assignments. I don't know what else a teacher can do to make that productive.
The teacher is figuring out a way to allow their instruction, allow their curriculum to be accessed outside of normal hours. And as you can imagine, for those families that have chosen that, outside of those normal hours, they would also like accessibility to those teachers outside of normal hours. And teachers already, bust their tail, for lack of a better term, during the actual day, during the actual school day. And certainly one thing that is concerning is the amount of hours our teachers are putting in. We've heard from them that they have, and they're willing to continue to do this, but that was one thing that they said was, if we can figure out a way to adjust this to get our numbers down to where it's manageable, they can really do that.
Technically, remote learning will go on for some students.
If a doctor can provide that documentation, then we're not going to force a kid to come back that has health concerns. So we're really talking about those students that chose remote learning on a voluntary basis, not because of health conditions.
What about those students who were flourishing
Are there any options for them other than homeschooling, or it's just time for everybody to come back?
Well, I think when you start thinking about that, we are certainly student-centered, but the input and the vehicle we use for those students to be successful is in the classroom. And there is when you're trying to operate two dual instructional systems, there is no doubt that the strain that it's putting on our instructional staff, i.e. the teachers, a little bit with campus administration, is something that you also have to be concerned about as well, Dana. And from getting feedback from our teachers and our principals, they see the value in being able to really focus on what they know, and that is classroom instruction. Now, certainly we'll still continue to offer the digital instruction, the virtual learning as well, for those that have a medical attestation, along with those that do get some type of sickness, whether it be COVID or during the flu. So there's going to be a continuum still going on. You know, Dana, we started tight on this, and we can loosen up at times, and then we can also contract again if we need to. Right now, the data says that we can loosen up a little bit. Certainly there is some COVID out there. We're dealing with that as well, and we think that the protocols that we have in place can maintain the safety on our campuses for our students as well.
Looking at the Texas Education Agency's latest data, Alba Golden has reported a total of 6 cases to the TEA. For the week ending October 18th, Tyler ISD reported 32 student cases and 12 staff cases, for a yearly total of 124 student cases and 66 staff cases, the majority of student cases in grades 7 through 12. But TISD says the number of active COVID-19 cases has remained below 1%. Dr. Crawford has said the academic, social, mental, and physical benefits of in-person school far outweigh the virus risks.
We can't lose another semester as far as credit attainment for like high school kids because graduation rates are going to be affected if we don't do something like this, which means that you might have a dropout crisis here in Tyler, which means it's going to turn into an economic crisis.
These decisions have been met with resistance from students, parents, and even teachers in some cases.
I think just people having patience and grace during this time. I mean, frustrations can run very high, and this really brings out the point how important it is for parents and teachers and school administrators to work together.
Everyone learning lessons along the way.
You have to have trust in each other, and you have to say that we are going to get through this and be stronger when it's over.
We need kids of all different makeups, economically and racially, sitting next to us to be successful as a society. We can't separate ourselves. We can't let this virus separate our society as it is for long term. There's no doubt that this was the right response early on, but there comes a time when you have to say that academically and educationally speaking, we need to be together.
We've got you covered, East Texas. Dana Hughey, CBS 19.